And I'm joined now by Tim Akers, Head of Policy at UKIP, and Mark Reckless and Charles Kennedy are still with me. Charles Kennedy, you've said in the past that immigration is not something in which a Dutch auction on the back of UKIP and various other Ken Speckle figures should be indulged in. Are you out of step with the public mood?
Well, I'd say, judging by the records of public opinion, yes. But I think in politics you've got to be prepared to be that. Politics has got to be the business of trying to persuade, change public opinion to what you think is a better viewpoint. I think we're all in the business of that, where we find ourselves in a minority occasionally. It's also got to be about leading public opinion. And I think this great debate, and I largely agree with Nick Robinson, I think the Rivers of Blood speech and its aftermath, it's a bit like Europe in a way. The establishment didn't want to discuss a lot of these matters. Well, in a healthy, vibrant democracy, you need to. And I think it's a good thing that we are. But I think it's incumbent on those of us who take a very different view from the Nigel Farage outlook to make that case robustly. Why
is it such a positive as far as you're concerned? I mean, there is conflicting research, as you know, but there is research that indicates in the short term, certainly, immigration does adversely affect particularly the low-wage and low-skilled in the UK, perhaps people themselves who were migrants at one stage. Do you accept that?
Yes, I think there's evidence to that effect. I think there's also evidence to the effect that a lot of the people who come into this country actually end up contributing in a net sense more than they are, if you like, taking out for the labour that they're contributing. So you can argue this both ways. I think that the key thing is, are we better in this internationalised world that we live in as a multicultural society functioning well? I think we are, and I think that's something to be to celebrate, quite frankly.
What's wrong with that?
Well, I think it's a question of numbers. We made a promise at the election. We were going to cut immigration from hundreds of thousands to no more than tens of thousands.
And you're not going to achieve it, are you?
Well, as it was in every year until 1997, when Labour then let in 4 million people. And we have actually made a lot of restrictions on immigration.
Well, Labour didn't let them in that sense. It was part of the agreement, wasn't it, that's made with the EU. But just to go on to your phrase, are you going to achieve this net migration target of tens of thousands?
We may do. It is a challenging target. I thought we were on target about 6 months ago. I'm worried we may be knocked off that target because of immigration from southern Europe, because of the problems with the euro, and because of Bulgaria and Romania. But I made a promise to my constituents that we would deliver on that promise for immigration, and I think it's essential that we do.
Right. The thing is, you can't really do much about it, can you, Mark Reckless? Because, as you have said yourself, migration from southern Europe, other member countries of the EU, there is free movement of people. Were you not promising something that you couldn't deliver?
Well, I think we should extend the transitional controls on Bulgaria and Romania, notwithstanding EU law. But what's happening is, because of the problems controlling EU immigration, we're having to do more on non-EU immigration. And I would say, why are we still allowing...
Is that damaging the economy by doing that?
I don't think it is. I don't think it helps our graduates domestically to let EU graduates stay on and get jobs after their graduation here, constituting now a third of graduate employment in London. Or why we allow Indian IT workers to come in and work for a short period at very low, quite low salaries in this country. Or why we allow 16,000 domestic servants into the country every year from outside the European Union. We can take more action on those, and I think we need to, in order to make sure we hit the target that we promised the electorate.
I mean, Tim Akers, certainly the rhetoric from David Cameron and the government, notwithstanding the Liberal Democrats, the Conservative side of the government, has been to try and limit in some way net migration, and they're now at 182,000, I think. And although it may not be achievable, they have gone some way in doing it, and they are trying to restrict access to benefits of new immigrants. So in a way, they're doing the sorts of things you're promising.
Well, we've been shaping the agenda on this. If it wasn't for UKIP, David Cameron wouldn't be talking about this. I dare say we would have this discussion now. That 182,000 is an increase in net migration. David Cameron's not going to get his immigration down to tens of thousands. It's still a lot. It's continuity blow. We've had 10 years of this, 10 years, and we've only been able to discuss it in the last 2 because the political class had a cosy consensus where they frankly wouldn't talk about it. You know, if it wasn't for UKIP, Cameron wouldn't have made the Europe speech or the immigration speech. We're shaping the agenda on this.
Right, but you're head of policy. When did you find out that UKIP wanted a 5-year moratorium on immigrants settling in the UK?
We've been discussing that for a while now.
Have you?
Yeah.
Right, so this wasn't something that just came out of the blue today?
No, we discuss policy all the time in UKIP.
Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I've always talked about immigration. I just don't think it's fair to say it's just a reaction to UKIP. There's a very different policy under Labour. Labour let in 4 million
the Conservative leadership?
We promised, and under the Conservatives, we never used to have that. And we promised under David Cameron that we would cut it back from the 250,000 a year we had under Labour to no more than 100,000. And I think it's essential we carry on and deliver on that promise.
No, you know, Mark, you know as well as I do, the only way we can do that is to bring forward the Europe debate now. And your leader is willing to kick the can down the road. Now, you talk a good talk on immigration. Now, you know as well as I do, the only way we can get back control of our borders is to leave the EU. So why are you supporting David Cameron's policies of kicking the can down the road?
I support getting back control of our own borders and leaving the EU. To do that, we need a Conservative government that will give a referendum in which people... There has to be a referendum. And if people want to vote for an independent Britain, they need a Conservative government that will give them that referendum.
Charles, do you not feel you're on the outside of this to some extent, looking in?
So I'm delighted. Yes, I'm absolutely relieved.
Or as I come to the initial question, that actually you're just going to be marginalised.
Very clear blue and deeper blue water, I think, that's flowing through the studio.
You support a referendum, then?
I'm very happy with the referendum. I supported a referendum over Maastricht 20 years ago.
And when would you have the referendum, Charles?
Well, I'd have had it 20 years ago for a start.
And now, when would you have an in-out referendum?
I think we've got a referendum this year on the future of one union, the United Kingdom, and I think after the May 15 election, we'll have another referendum on the future of the European Union and our part in it, and that to me seems sensible.
Is the debate you've just heard here about two parties in a way trying to vie for who is going to be tougher on immigration, is that edifying as far as you're concerned? Or is that actually what we need to be discussing? Well, detailed policy about whether immigrants should be restricted from accessing benefits, whether there should be a moratorium. Is this where it should go?
No, I think it's perfectly sensible to have the more detailed debate about the specifics of policy. I mean, it's an insult to people's intelligence if we don't. And I've never taken the view in politics of disparaging whether it's UKIP, the Conservatives, the Scottish Nationalists or anybody else, because I happen to take a diametrically opposite view. It's as legitimate to express these views as it's legitimate to rehearse mine.
Right, let's pick up on Nigel Farage's point that actually it would be better to be poorer in some ways, because there is plenty of research that states from a GDP growth point of view that actually the country is better off as a result of immigration. It's one view that has been put out there, in fact, by the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, who actually predict without net migration, without immigration, GDP will come down. Is it worth being poorer to restrict immigration?
Well, what matters to whether you're poor is not GDP, but GDP per head. And I think the impact of immigration on that overall tends to be quite small. But what happens is a lot of people, perhaps who are better off, benefit from employing cheaper immigrant labour. And what used to happen is those people then looked down on the rest of the population and said they were racist for not agreeing with them. And actually what's happening is the rest of the population are very often competing with those new people in the labour market, and therefore they're not as supportive of immigration as people who are better off.
Except the research says it's only short term, that in the long term more people in the population would benefit. How do you counteract that argument if research does state that in terms of growth, in terms of GDP, which the Conservative government particularly has obviously made a sort of cornerstone of its economic policy, if that improves with immigration, how does it work if Nigel Farage says we're going to be poorer?
The research is very mixed, you see.
Well, we're just having these debates now, so let's have more research on this. Let's find out. Let's
you do accept that's what the research says.
But the research now says that. The research now says that. So, but let's look at this. We've got school place shortages. We've got social housing crisis. We've got communities that feel uncomfortable. We're having this discussion now because 3/4 of the British public want immigration reduced, and we have 1 million young unemployed people in this country, and that's a disgrace.
Right, but do you accept, as Nigel Farage does seem to, doesn't he? I mean, in those comments, he did seem to accept that we would be worse off from a GDP growth point of view if we don't have continued immigration of some sort.
Statistically, well, but statistics mean very little to somebody who has just gone through Christmas and New Year without a job.
And that's the point, isn't it? Economically, it's arguable, but socially, there is a big impact on certain parts of the country, particularly when it comes to hospitals, school places. Do you accept that this country, they just don't have the room for these a lot more immigration in terms of social fabric that exists at the moment?
No, I don't accept that as a carte blanche statement. And I think if you look at the National Health Service, if it wasn't for a lot of labour at all levels within the National Health Service, then what is a very creaking edifice at the moment would be really in a state of, if not moribund, then real, genuine crisis, a much overused word in politics.
All right, I'll just let you have the final word.
The reason that so many people from Europe are coming to the UK is because our economy is now doing better compared to the massive problems they have in the Eurozone. And I think actually we can cut immigration down to below 100,000 while still it being beneficial for the economy. Our universities are still doing well from people coming in, but they should go back afterwards. And we should have in people we will benefit from, not those who are going to compete disproportionately with my constituents struggling to get jobs.
Vince Cable would argue that by restricting non-EU immigration, you're stopping the very people you would like to attract. It is. Tim Akers, thank you very much. Mark Pretorius, I believe you're staying with us.